everybody and welcome to Room for Reviews, back with more test discs for the very first time collaborating with Third Window Films. Massive thank you to Adam behind Third Window Films for taking a chance on me and my little channel, promoting your fantastic releases and bringing some fantastic films to the big screen and onto home media for collectors and people that want to explore more of Japanese cinema. And I will be talking about, in this 3-part review, this will be part 1 today, the Mike Hama Trilogy, coming out on the 27th of October 2025 on a fantastic collector's edition set. All 3 discs, all 3 films, with a booklet, loads of brand new extras included, and for the very first time in high definition outside of Japan. If you're not too sure about the films and you think it's quite an expensive month with many of the releases coming out from Radiance, Arrow Video, you can rent these films or purchase them digitally on Amazon usually, or Apple TV, usually for a very reasonable price for rental, and it gives you a bit of an opportunity then to check out all 3 films on Amazon and to see if you want to pick up that nice edition box set after. So definitely 2 ways of supporting them in terms of the physical box set coming out and the rental services and digital purchases that will be available on Apple and Amazon in terms of the UK. I will be putting a link in the description below for my friend Johnny, a Fanatical Dragon, who did a fantastic interview with Adam behind Third Window Films a couple of years ago now, I want to say, which dives into basically the origins of the company itself and some of those releases and a bit more about the person behind this kind of really independent company that is really pumping out some fantastic editions and some releases outside of Japan for the very first time. I think he did a really fantastic job of giving a really thorough interview, talking about some of the releases at the time with Third Window and a bit more about Adam and his background and, you know, what the kind of the trials and tribulations is in terms of releasing these films and the practicality of it and doing things very on hand and being a very busy man. So definitely a really good little insight into a bit more about Third Window Films and Adam behind it as well. So it's wonderful to see the Mike Hama Trilogy for the very first time in terms of a film fanatic, someone getting into Japanese cinema for the past kind of year or so, and to explore another side, the Tearaway films and Kenji Fukusaka and the V cinema films, J-horror. And it's really nice to see some more of these kind of mid-90s kind of pulpy kind of fun movies that were very few and far between, because as stated in the extras on this edition, it just talks about Japanese cinema being a bit kind of, stalemate, and there wasn't as much kind of being produced in terms of theatrical wise, and that's why we had the V cinema aspect to it as well in terms of the straight to video on demand. So it's great to see a series of films on cinemas that were really well received, and all 3 films of the series is directed by Kazuo Hiroshi, who did all these back in the 90s. He did all 3 films practically back to back. They weren't all filmed at the exact same time, but there was planned and kind of sold and pitched as an actual trilogy concept with the producer in the studio he went with, and he really wanted to do something quite creative and unique and something quite different for late 90s detective kind of noir, but changing it up in terms of each entry and doing a really fascinating kind of throwback to different genres, but with the same character as the main central focus, with a detective character in the middle of it. And he did all 3 films, and such a unique kind of series, such a unique idea, which I, being completely honest, never heard of this trilogy before. And it makes sense, being the fact it didn't get an international release. As far as I know, this has not got a Blu-ray release anywhere in terms of the, outside of Japan, or even in Japan, if I'm being honest. I'm really looking forward to diving into all 3 films and reporting back to you guys on the brand new transfer, the film itself, and the special features you're going to get in terms of each disc. So this one will be the first entry in terms of the most terrible time in my life, which is great in terms of that introduction. The second one is the Stairway to the Distant Past, and then the third and final one is Trap. All during the kind of the 90s. Now, briefly giving a little bit of the story, this follows Michael Hama, which is a pro detective played by the wonderful Masataka Nakase, who also was in the fantastic Electric Dragon 8000, also done by Third Window Films. Absolutely love this. Very similar in terms of style, not literally, but in terms of that kind of pulpy, kind of, late 90s kind of energy. Just super creative and super fun. Put that addition there, really fantastic. Absolutely recommend it. But his performance in the film I thought was brilliant, and the whole film itself, in terms of the idea, in terms of this kind of released in 1994, this kind of 90s view on a kind of a film noir kind of throwback. And I would say the introduction of this really sums up not just the character, the tone of the film, the style, a little bit of window breaking in terms of some of the speaking to the camera, which is great, and just some of those choices very early on, which establishes a tone, an atmosphere, and where the film's going to go in terms of this character. And basically, he's a private detective who works at top of the cinema, kind of lobby kind of area, which is great. You got a fantastic kind of introduction when you got the cinema scope, you got the title of the film actually on the billboard, which I think is great, showing those really classic old tearaway films, 50s kind of films, a staple of the time. And basically he works on top of the cinema with a projection going on in the background, which is just oozing with style. And basically he is a private detective. He's someone who finds missing people, and he explains very early on that he has a 16-year-old sister, which he looks after. He's had some previous drama in the past. He's been referred to constantly throughout the film as someone who's going to go back to his old ways. So definitely got a bit of violent tendencies, and definitely done some very kind of questionable things that we kind of alluded to in this film, which I would imagine will be dived in more into the later sequels. Why is he looking after his 16-year-old sister? Where's his mom? Where's his dad? We don't know the full scope of his circumstances, but that's fine because there is more movies to explore that. It's criminal aspects to him, but that's alluded to a little bit with the detective character, that also a police officer that keeps popping in and out of the film. He's such a likable, charming person as well, someone who, again, who really does care, and we've established this really early on the film. Very accurate to what the director of this film said in the extras, in terms of it's a character that is trying to find a climax to his own story. I love that. That is amazing, and that really sums up a lot about what the film is. And hearing that after watching the film makes a lot of sense in terms of a lot of the choices being made. I've already talked about the technical aspects a little bit of this film, in terms of those kind of deliberate kind of throwback to 50s, 60s Japan and kind of American film noir, and having the film being black and white, a 90s film doing a kind of a throwback to kind of 50s, 60s Japanese cinema, film noir, and American cinema as well, having a lot of deliberate kind of choices in terms of its style, in terms of, definitely being inspired from many directors and kind of films of that time with the tearaway films. Some of the fight sequences that do happen in the very brief ones that do happen, in terms of the focus and the camera angles and the distortion of the imagery, which I think is great. The close-up shots with the kind of the items, the shadow work on behind him, some of the angle choices. It's all very classic, simple story that is very effective. And I said this multiple times on the channel. You get your characters right, get your story right, and you can have all the bells and whistles you want, and everything else on top of that makes the film even better. And I think this has a really unique character straight off from the bat, and you find out more about him as the film goes along. Through this hour-and-a-half movie, someone who is very kind-hearted, someone who is who's looking after his sister, who's making money, who has good friendship groups, that has special skills or connections. He's not afraid to kind of ruffle some feathers. He's a waiter that's come from Taiwan, who's basically learning the language, who's settling in, and basically who's being mocked and kind of humiliated by a typical Yakuza with his little knife. And circumstances do happen. Our main character gets his finger kind of chopped and surgically put back on, and the Taiwanese character is basically more than meets the eye, essentially. Someone who is ardent and very proud, and basically offers him some money in services of basically what's happened to his finger and the circumstances, and basically giving him some money to go and find his brother, which also is from Taiwan, who has basically gone missing, and he's trying to find him within Japan. And one of the things about the story that I really appreciated, again, is how simple it is, but has a lot of world building. It has a lot of weight on these characters, the violence that does come in here and there. It's about this idea of trying to do the right thing and trying to be in a position where you can do something right. And our main character basically wants to do the right thing in the situation. And you got this new kind of formed gang called the Black Dog Gang, which if I'm not mistaken, which is known as the New Japan, New Japs. And it's kind of adds on to this kind of bigger story that's definitely a really big talking point within 90s kind of, Japan cinema, mainstream and indie, and also within other films, from the 50s onwards, in terms of this idea of different cultures, different kind of Asian backgrounds, in terms of kind of Japan, Hong Kong, Taiwanese, all different types of cultures and nationalities. And this leads into one of the best sequences of the film, involving the detective's kind of taxi friend, which has skill sets. Essentially, they break into this kind of, I believe, the Black Dog Gang's kind of hideout, and they basically want to break into this vault. And it's kind of this really high-tech kind of, Christian, Jesus kind of vault, where they have to kind of do some gadgetry, and there's some really stylized choices, some very analog, old-school devices in terms of breaking into the safe and taking pictures with this little kind of snapshot camera, which is great. And that leads into a bit of a kerfuffle kind of fight scene, and you get this great kind of shadow work, and I love the kind of little close-ups, tasers, and you get to see, he tasers them, and then it kind of cuts to them with the lighting in the background going crazy, and it's their expressions, and it's just, the film definitely reminds me of something like Black Tie Killers, offering a very interesting and quite unique kind of position where the film wants to conclude but doesn't reconclude at the same time, presenting some ideas which I thought were just fantastic and very deliberate, saying, hey, come back for the next entry, come back for the next sequels, and being designed in that way to be a trilogy. Quality and that kind of enjoyment factor was consistent for all the way through. There is some surprises that do happen along the way, and I'm really looking forward to checking out these next two entries. I'm really hoping that kind of style, the characters, the energy continues on in the next two movies, and while also doing something quite fun, unique at the same time. And a must watch for the most terrible time of my life, at least for the first entry, coming out very soon on Blu-ray and for digital in terms of purchase. So let's dive into the special features. The special features for the first film I think are really appropriate and just a good length overall. There is a brand new audio commentary. I have listened to all of it. I hadn't had the opportunity to kind of dive into the entire audio commentary, but from what I have listened to, it's quite interesting and very informative. And you also get a brand new interview with the director, which is about half an hour piece, which I thought was really excellent, and just kind of dives into his previous films, being an independent filmmaker, going into more mainstream, and then doing something like this, pitching it to a studio, to a producer as a trilogy, and not being taken away, and potentially going to Sony, which I thought was quite interesting. And I want to have a dream of being a director, and kind of feeling obligated to do that and to achieve that. We're doing some of his very early films, and then leading into some more bigger films later on, which I think was just really nice and heartfelt. And you get a nice sense of idea of who this director is, and questions definitely led to, like, would there be another entry? Would there be a fourth or another trilogy? And he dives into that as well in terms of those kind of potentials. And I thought it was a really good little interview that kind of really dives into the director and his past and his passion for making these films, and the process of kind of the Japanese studio and the independent scenes. I thought was a really good little insight into that overall. You also get a brand new interview with the producer, which is about 15 minutes, talking about them taking a risk on the film and giving an insight in terms of the producer side of it and being friends with the director, which I thought was great. And you also get a standard trailer as well. So that's been my thoughts and impressions on the film itself, the special features. Looking forward to checking out the sequels very soon, guys. In the meantime, guys, Amphlett Reviews. Signing out.